We're going to read verses 11 and 12. Thank you, Sister Debbie, for all you do with the monthly program. It really is a great thing, and I thank you. I know you enjoy doing it and you don't like accolades, but thank you.
It is very much my pleasure.
Thank you. We're going to cover some of that today, but maybe a little different angle. In 1 Kings chapter 19, the 11th verse, is to give you a little background here. Elijah the prophet has been running for his life. That's not figuratively speaking. He's on the run, and he made a run for the border, so to speak, and literally. And he went as far south as he could in Israel, and then he went further south into the wilderness, all the way to Mount Horeb. Way down, that's not far from the Red Sea. What's the phrase? He got out of Dodge when he found out Queen Jezebel had, she sent him a message. And you're going to be dead tomorrow about this time. And he says, hide and watch. And boom, he was gone. And he was gone. And in fact, an angel wakes him up. He was sleeping and had made something to eat. Even had a fire built. And told him to rise and eat, and had a jar of water. And he drank it. And he goes back to sleep. And the angel wakes him up later and has him do it again and says, you're going to need this. You got a long ways to go. This is Elijah on the run. And Elijah is hiding now in a cave. Hiding out. And the Lord speaks to him. But if you're paying attention as we read it, you're going to realize he didn't actually do immediately what the Lord told him to do. But we'll get to that in a second. Verse 11, I'm reading from the New King James this morning. Then he said, this is the Lord, go out, because he's in the cave, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by. And there was a great and strong wind. It tore into the mountains and broke the rocks. Wow. In pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. So if it wasn't enough that the rocks are breaking because of the wind, and no doubt because it's on a mountain, they're rolling down, and there's a lot of stuff probably happening. Now we have an earthquake. But after the earthquake was over, now fire has come. And after the fire, a still small voice. Now earlier in this very chapter, in fact in verse 4, Elijah at one point, he prayed that the Lord would take his life. Just take me. Just kill me now. And I'm the last one. I'm the last one. I'm the last prophet of the Lord. They're all gone. Everybody's worshiped Baal, and I'm the last one. That's the way he felt. He was wrong, we'll find out. But that's what he thought. And in verse 14, we find out that there's actually 7,000 that haven't bowed their knee to Baal. And Elijah didn't realize that. Sometimes we feel like we're the whole center of the universe, but we're really not. The Lord has a great thing going somewhere. That's another subject for another time. Elijah, though, while he's in this cave, he's been waiting to hear from the Lord. And the Lord said, go out. He didn't. We know that because of what happens here coming up in a few verses. Then he went out. So he probably started to, but then the Lord passed by. Now what happens here? This is a prophet of the Lord, Elijah. I'm pretty sure even people that don't claim to be Christians have heard of Elijah. He's a man that God used mightily in his prophetic ministry, and he knew the Lord. He recognized the voice of the Lord, and that's what's important in the passage we read. See, many times in the Bible we read where God spoke through different means, and some of them was through, like in the book of Job, it says he spoke through a whirlwind. Well, we would call it a cyclone or a tornado. It's this wind, and God spoke to Job out of that at one point. Well, the wind came by here, and the Lord didn't talk. And Elijah recognized that the Lord wasn't speaking. But he felt his presence. How do we know that? The Lord passed by. He acknowledged that. Woo! Ever been in the service and feel the Spirit of the Lord move in the room? Well, he's always present, right? We just tuned into the right frequency and we're like, hot dog, he was here already. Yes. We just tuned in. Well, at that moment, Elijah, when the voice of the Lord says, go outside, he's tuning in, and he feels the presence of the Lord, and the Lord is passing by in a demonstrative form and fashion. And the wind is blowing, and rocks are breaking, and then there's an earthquake. To my knowledge, I have not been in an earthquake. Anybody here been in an earthquake? Paul?
Yeah.
Dave? A couple of you? Okay.
We had one here in Nebraska just a
Yeah.
month ago.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't know about it. I mean, I saw it on the news, but I thought, well, I didn't feel anything. One of my cousins lived in Seattle, Washington area, and he called me one day, and he says, man, we just had an earthquake yesterday, or whatever it was. And I said, really? I said, what was that like? He said, well, you ever been on a surfboard and you just feel like everything's going like this and this? And I'm thinking, what did you just say? He said, man, plates were flying out of the cupboards. The refrigerator moved across the floor in the kitchen, and he said it felt like the house literally flexed. And he said it lasted about 2 seconds. But that was a long 2 seconds. And the whole place was a wreck. It's like everything in the house just got dumped on the floor. And I thought, oh, well, I haven't been through that kind of an earthquake. But Elijah went through something like that in the cave after this wind. But he knows the voice of the Lord, and he didn't hear him. Although there are times in the Bible where God spoke through with a shaking. He wasn't doing that at this point. And then the fire came. Now, it doesn't tell us what he saw with this fire. I don't know if the whole mountain caught fire. We had a forest fire. I don't know that. I don't know if it was something like Moses saw with the burning bush. There was a fire, and the Lord spoke to Moses out of the fire, didn't he? So these are 3 ways that historically God has spoken. But Elijah knows the voice of the Lord, and he didn't hear his voice in any of those times. Now, I've heard ministers say, God doesn't speak through those things. Well, I'm telling you, he did once, and we know that. And he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He can do whatever in the world he wants to. Okay? If he used a donkey to talk to a prophet named Balaam, I'm telling you folks, he can do whatever he wants. Okay? And if he chooses to speak through a fire, I'm not going to say, wait, you can't do that. You're only supposed to whisper. Because that's what happens next. He hears this still, small voice, and immediately he wraps his mantle around his face and steps outside the cave. That's the first time he actually came out. Now the Lord told him that in verse 11. Go out. He had the wind and the earthquake and the fire. He's like, I'm not going out in that. But he heard the whisper and he recognized the Lord's voice. And it's to me, I saw something I had not seen here before. So prior to the Lord saying, go out, the verse prior, Elijah's in the cave and the Lord speaks to him. And he asks him a very simple question, and it's not a profound question. He says, Elijah, what are you doing here? Oh, I'm running for my life. I'm the last one. Everybody else is serving idols. I totally put that in my own words. I'm going outside here, stand before the Lord. And here comes the wind. I'm not going out in that. We got rocks in an earthquake. Woo! It's on fire, baby. Ah! I'm not getting out in there. And the Lord whispers. And he wraps his face in the mantle. Why? God might be appearing out there. He can't see God. He'll die. He wraps his face and he steps out to hear the Lord speak to him. There was a commercial on television back in the 80s, I think it was, early 80s. Pretty sure I was just out of high school and college. And it said, if you want to get somebody's attention, whisper. Anybody remember that? I don't remember what the product was, but I remember the commercial. And it's true. We could be sitting in a room, maybe we're all visiting here, and somebody starts whispering loud enough that other people hear it, everybody's going to stop and turn. Human nature. Okay? The Lord whispered and got Elijah's attention. Also illustrating, he can speak any way he wants to. Doesn't have to be in a certain way. Sometimes we need to slow down, stop, and listen. Sometimes we're waiting to hear from the Lord and we miss the way he's trying to say something to us because we're too busy. There's too much noise going on in our life. Or we're expecting him to speak in another way, and that is what we're filtering everything through. And well, it isn't coming through that way. I don't want to hear that. But he's really trying to say something. He's trying to get our attention, but you can't hear him. Now he's guiding your path best he can because we're not paying attention. We aren't being sensitive to his voice. Now Elijah was intentionally trying to be sensitive to hear the voice of the Lord in all of that wind and shaking and fire. And we don't know how long a duration that was, but I'm guessing it was more than a couple of seconds because he was paying attention. But we get busy and we can't hear him. Elijah felt the presence of the Lord. I've been in meetings where I felt the presence of the Lord so thick. In fact, we had Bishop Norman Wagner as a guest speaker when we were over on 20th Street many years ago. And we had some of the other churches in the area come, and it was a big meeting. We had a lot of folks there. And the Lord came into that place. And I turned around and I said to Pastor Howie, he was on the platform with me, and I said, I shouted because we couldn't hear each other. The whole place was just laying out. The Lord was moving. It was powerful. I said, God is thick in here like peanut butter. I couldn't think of another way to describe it. It was so thick. It was like you could feel a thickness of the Holy Ghost. It was unique. I've not felt it before or since quite like that. Elijah felt the presence of God, and God was manifest, and the wind and the rocks were reacting to the very presence of Almighty God. But because of his relationship with the Lord, he recognized God wasn't actually speaking through those things, but he was actively listening. He's trying to hear because he knows the Lord is going to tell him something. Well, he told him, step outside and stand before the Lord. All right, I want to hear from you. And boom! A whisper. Oh, he recognized the Lord's voice then. I've told the story before. I'm not going to elaborate on it at this time, but I was standing in the office of my manager. It's been many, many years ago. And I was an employee of the month. My name literally was on the sign, scrolling. Mark Justice, employee of the month. And they told me I was being fired. And I was like, I gestured to the sign. I'm the employee of the month. I mean, what's happening? And in our discourse, this woman who did not serve the Lord said, things like this have a way of working out for people like you. And immediately I knew that was God speaking to me through that woman. And it shocked me. I remember and I took it in for a couple of seconds. And I'm like, hold on, Lord, I recognize your voice. How could I know that? Because I believe that personally he speaks to me, so I know his voice. And suddenly, I'm hearing his voice. And I just said, okay. And the very next day, I had a job that paid way more that I would have never applied for or interviewed for, because I was working all the time and overtime at this place, which was a dead-end job, but I had no other prospects. He had to get me up out of there. But I heard it. And she wasn't whispering. She wasn't yelling either. She just said, things like this have a way of working out for people like you. And I remember driving home thinking about that. People like me, I'm a child of the Lord. And he orders my steps. And he makes all things work together for the good of them who love the Lord. Well, I love the Lord. So he's going to work this out. And I came home, and my wife almost cried. Why are you home? And I told her. She was like, what are we going to do? Well, the next day we found out. God was in it. Recognizing the Lord's voice is such a valuable skill that the child of God really must learn. Now, this is a true story. I'm not telling anything that's not true. I don't know why I said that up front. This is a true story. But it really sounds fantastic. And some of you might think, what? No, this really happened. So my grandmother, my dad's mom, when my dad was a little bitty kid, when did she come to the Lord? Were you 4? 2. He was 2 years old, so he's just a little bitty kid. And she got saved. And she heard people at church and saying, well, the Lord told me, or I heard the Lord, or I was praying and the Lord spoke to me. And she said to the Lord, Lord, I want to recognize your voice. I want to know your voice. And she was in a church service at the time. And a voice spoke to her and said, the pastor is going to ask so-and-so to say a prayer or something, I believe is what it was. And she thought, what? And just then the pastor asked that person to do the very thing. And she thought, what in the world? And then the voice told her something else. The pastor's going to do this. And that happened. And the third time. And then the voice says, that's my voice. The rest of her life, she knew the voice of the Lord. And he never steered her wrong. He never contradicts his word. He doesn't. Elijah knew the voice of the Lord. He had a relationship with the Lord, and he recognized when God spoke. That's important. Now, there's no suggestion in the text that God was still whispering when he finally gives Elijah this word that he's going to give him. Now, keep in mind, Elijah thinks he's done. A few verses before, he's asked the Lord to kill him. Just take my life. And the Lord tells him about this point that there's 7,000 left in that country that have not yet served Baal. And he says, I have a job for you. He tells him to go and anoint a man named Hazael king over the Assyrian nation. They didn't serve the Lord. What? And on your way, anoint Jehu king over Israel. Well, Jehu was a soldier in the army. He wasn't nobody in nobility. He wasn't a descendant of David. Now remember, at this point, Israel and Judah had split. After Solomon's death, when his son Rehoboam became king, they split. And David's line continued over Judah, and there was a series of lines over Israel because they just kept serving idols and taking people away from the Lord. And then, oh, by the way, you're going to anoint Elisha on the way to be prophet in your room. Well, he knows his ministry's coming to an end. Because he's going to be anointing somebody else to take his place. So that means his is coming to an end. So, he had a job to do. Sometimes we expect the Lord to speak or open a door in a specific way. Well, he just might not do it that way. Learning to recognize when he is talking to you and when he is not is a skill every child of God should learn. If you're a kid and you don't know your own parent's voice, you're probably going to be lost in a crowd. You're not going to be home for dinner on time. Not back in the 70s when you just played outside until you heard your mom or your dad call or whistle for you and say it's time to come home and eat. Anybody had that? Oh yeah, I remember hearing my parents' voice and hearing my name and stuff. Some of my friends say, "Hey, I think that's your mom." And I'd head home because I didn't want to be late. We didn't have a microwave in those days. Dinner was going to be cold if I didn't get it. And who wants cold dinner? Nobody on purpose, I hope. Anyway, well, one time a young boy named Samuel heard the voice of God, and he thought it was somebody else. I'm going to let that simmer for just a few seconds. It was the Lord speaking, but he thought it was somebody else. It wasn't. It was the Lord. The Lord had never really talked to him before. Not that he ever knew. So he didn't recognize it. But he was positive it was Eli's voice. The priest that is raising him. And so 3 times he goes and wakes Eli up and says, "Hey, I'm here." And Eli's like, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." About the 3rd time, Eli's like, "Hang on a minute. It must be the Lord calling this boy." So he tells him, the next time you hear that voice, tell him, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." In so many words. And the voice came again. And Samuel did what he was told, and the Lord gave him this really an ominous word. And the next morning Eli asked him, and he said, "Yes, it came back." He said, "Well, what did he say?" And he told him everything. He goes, "Well," and it was bad news for Eli. And he goes, "Well, that sounds like the Lord." Samuel had to learn. Every one of us have to learn. One of my best friends one time called me, and I've mentioned this before, so I'm not going to give a lot of detail on this one today, but I thought it would be appropriate. When we were living in Fort Worth, Texas, one day my phone rang. I could see it was one of my friends, one of my best friends from college, and I answered the phone, and he was at the airport. Well, if you've ever been in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you might be 12 miles from someplace, but you're probably 45 minutes away because the traffic is terrible just about any time of the day. And he had, his connection was like in 20 minutes, but he was in town. He just wanted to call and say hi. So for just a few minutes we talked, and he told me where he was going, what's going on. He says, "What's happening with you?" And I told him he had known a year before that I lost my job and wanted to know if I'd found a new one. I said, "No, I haven't." And really a little confused about all that. And he said, "You know what, maybe the Lord's trying to tell you something, but you're not hearing it because you're not looking for it," or something to that effect. And I thought, you know what? I remember I had walked out of the house into my garage. I was sitting on a dog crate, I think, on the phone. I thought, I'm going to ask the Lord about that. I said, "Yeah, maybe you're right. I'll pray about that." So I got off the phone. I'm like, "Lord, are you really trying to tell me something? And I'm not getting the message." Well, that evening I was reading the Bible and praying more earnestly about that. And the Lord spoke to me just like that whisper, just boom. And I was reading my Bible. leaning on the sink in the master bathroom because somebody can't have a light on while they're going to sleep. I won't name them. And so I was in there with the door closed, reading, and I remember I read it, and I just looked up. I read it again, I was like, oh, we're supposed to move. It was so plain. How dumb was I not to see that a year before? I saw the whole thing at that point. I'm like, oh my goodness, we should have moved a year ago. How did I not see this? I said, well, Lord, I understand, but you're going to have to tell her. Because if I just say it, she's not going to understand. So yeah, I need you to tell her. That was a Monday evening. Wednesday night after church, we get in the car to go home. She immediately looks at me and says, we have to move. I said, yeah, the Lord told me that 2 days ago. I just needed him to tell you. Okay. I said, I will call the real estate lady tomorrow. In a time when nobody was selling their house. There was a guy trying to sell his house in our neighborhood around the corner. We had to drive past his house to get into our part of the subdivision. The sign had faded in the sun. It was in the yard that long. Literally faded in the sun. You couldn't get the home builders, the companies who were building houses, oh, they just kept on building, which was part of the problem. They were selling homes fully furnished with everything. All you had to do was bring your clothes, and the same price or lower than you could buy an empty one. They were giving them, trying to do what they could, because it was a terrible time to sell a house. Our house sold in 9 days. We had 11 showings. We had 2 offers for full price. Nobody tried to lowball. We had everything we wanted, and we just picked the one that wanted to close the earliest. When I finally got the word. And he was trying to tell me for a year, but I didn't see it until I did, and then I couldn't unsee it. I was like, oh, how could I not understand this? Recognizing when he's saying something is really important to your walk with God. Listening, then, is important. And stopping and listening, that takes practice. Because life is busy. I know this is a goofy question, and I'm asking it on purpose to be goofy. Is there anybody in this room that is not living in the 21st century? Nope. We all live here, and it's wild. And there's constant information, if you allow it. These things were a neat idea, but I really wish they were just simply a plain old telephone, like they were at first. Because now, there was a lady, drove up on the railing, over there by the furniture mart, Friday?
Probably.
Saturday morning, yes. No, Friday morning. It was Friday morning. Drove completely in the curve, got up on the sidewalk, got her car up in the air on the little railing, and she was stuck looking at her phone. I'm glad none of the employees were on that sidewalk because they all crossed the road there, or she'd have just plowed over a bunch of people, or they would be diving for their lives. Just looking at her phone. I've seen people walk into signs. Like a no parking sign or something, you know, the side of this one. Hey, whoa. How many times don't raise your hand, if you're being honest, maybe you're a little distracted with the phone, even at home. Just sitting in a chair. How many hours do we waste doing this? Hours! Now, if you're honest, you do it. Information overload, that doesn't even touch it. I thought it was information overload with television. So did my parents. That's why they turned it off. Well, if there's nothing on, why do you want it on? Oh, just some noise. No. That was it. And growing up, me and my sister were the remote control. Dad would say, turn it up. We'd get up. Oh, there. Turn it up. Oh, more? Okay. Hey, move the, okay. Those things. My mom had aluminum foil stuck on. Oh, turn it to channel 3. Okay. Click, 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 click. Oh, okay. Sometimes you had to adjust it. Anybody remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
And you only have one TV.
We had, well, yeah, until I saved my money and bought a little 13-inch black and white Gold Star from TG&Y. I walked down to TG&Y, I bought it, and I walked home with it, carrying the box. I was so happy. I think it cost me $40. Well, making $2.60 an hour, I worked a long time to get that $40. So I put it in my room. My dad came home from work, and there it was on my desk. Where'd you get that? I bought it today at TG&Y. What? So I had a TV in my room. And you thought that was information, right? We thought it was awesome. We got a magazine publication once a month. We were in touch. Now, once a minute is not fast enough for some people. It's too much. We'll get so distracted with that stuff, plus whatever's coming from work. I have not put anything work-related yet on this phone, and I don't want to. Because as soon as you do, every day of the week, they're going to be reaching out. Hey, 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 can you check on this? Hey, 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 I need you to do that. I'm not doing it. That's what I told my boss. No, I'm not putting that on my phone. Well, sometimes you want to get home. Well, you have my phone number. If it's really urgent, you can call or send me a text. Because if you don't, you've got a rope tied to you, and they're always going to be after you. And I don't mean that as anybody's a bad person. They're not. Stop and listen. You're trying to hear from God, and you can't. You need to stop and listen. You might be expecting to do something a certain way. Throw that out the window. That's probably the problem, is you're looking for one thing, but he's really trying to say something completely different. That was my problem. Didn't know I needed to move. Literally, I was looking for something else, and any suggestion to him, like, yeah, there's no way that's the thing. Kept on looking through the fog. Oh, it's got to be here somewhere. He's going to tell me something. Nope. And when he did, everything else was so plain. I'm like, how did I not recognize that? Because I wasn't looking for it. Don't look specifically for something. If you're trying to hear from him, just learn to listen for him. Don't have a preconceived idea, because it might be wrong. And when you're looking through everything through that kind of filter, you don't see it. Somebody here today, somebody listening sometime to this, needs to understand that the Lord is trying to tell you something, and you're not receiving the clear message because you're filtering it through whatever you believe or expect that he's going to say. And because you're not seeing or hearing that, you're confused. Stephen Curtis Chapman, a Christian songwriter, wrote a song back in the 1990s. So it's an old one for some of you. It's a new one for some of you. Waiting for Lightning. And the context of that song is he was praying and asking the Lord for something and expecting God to answer with lightning, but really he was showing him a whole different thing. And while he was waiting for lightning, he missed what God was actually trying to tell him. Don't let that be the case for you today. Take the time to slow down and ask him if he's trying to tell you something and you're just not getting it. And then stop and listen. If you're intentionally listening to hear from him, maybe some ways he talked to you in the past will come by, like it did for Elijah. The shaking, the wind, and the fire. But he was actively listening. He's like, okay, I see those things, but that's not what he's saying to me right now. I'm still listening. And then he heard the voice. And he's like, that's it. Wrapped his face, and stepped out to hear the rest. Let's stand.